Tonight on Rage Cage, Sam Locke takes on Brandon Zachary in one of the biggest geek debates of all time, one of the most highly anticipated finales of all time, Game of Thrones. Was it good or wasn't it? Let's find out.
So the final season of Game of Thrones, to a certain extent, was never going to be as good as literally everybody wanted it to be. A series of that level of popularity, hitting such high expectations, that it's unfair to consider, oh, it wasn't the perfect dream series where Wolverine showed up in the end to save the day with Batman and Link. There is a cause to be said that the hatred for the final season can be partly affixed to that overestimation of what it was going to be. It also, stories, like, in terms of the plot of the final season, it really does work as a genuine natural character growth for most of the characters. Jon goes through his final arc, and it's fitting as somebody who's used to doing the right thing and the honorable thing. Well, he has to do it, and it's the worst thing ever. Arya is confronted with all of the actual realities of, can I go back to being a member of society, or do I like being who I am? Daenerys gets a genuinely great arc of confronting what happens when things don't go your way, the temptation hits, and you go for it. Like, all the character work in the final season is very good. The biggest problem with it is that it is rushed. If the season had been 10 episodes, it would have had the space and the time to really let those moments and that stuff grow. The season is rushed, and the execution is not as good as even I wanted it to be, but it is still a solid bit of storytelling that fits perfectly within the context of the show. And the ending works perfectly. The final moments of the story work.
As a Game of Thrones super fanboy, in terms of abject quality, the last two seasons were awful. We had, these amazing, like, season 3 and season 4, where we have this really intricate power struggle and everything else, and we have this king who's a child, but also excessively cruel. And we just had all this beautiful character and nuance. And around season 6, the writers were like, you know what, let's just throw all this away and make none of this matter. That's one of the main things that annoys me about why the last season, or even 2 seasons, were just absolute garbage, is because we lose all this nuance of character due to these, like, make-believe time constraints. If they ask HBO, hey, can we have more time, they're not going to say no. It was the biggest series in history. It's just fascinating how, like, the entire zeitgeist of Game of Thrones just dries up because of these things. I'm not even going into, like, the actual characters and the things that were wrong yet. We're just talking about the big picture. Like, wait for my round 2. We're gonna get into it.
There is something to be said about the creators of the show not wanting to work on the show anymore, and that is very disappointing. As also a huge fan of the series, I think that's where you can tell that the show does get rushed. That the episodes that what used to be a half-season-long storyline all of a sudden is done in an episode. But to call the entire season trash because of that doesn't do justice to the stuff that really does work in these last section of the show. There's a lot of little things to complain about, but sequences like the Battle of Winterfell and the preceding episode that is just full of genuinely affecting and terrific character beats. You get stuff like Daenerys her attack on King's Landing is genuinely thrilling and exciting. Like, you lose a lot of really great stuff if you just blow off this final season.
Okay, here we go. This is where it's gonna happen. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the Battle of Winterfell really quick. One of the coolest battles in the entire show. If I could see it. Oh my goodness. Who made the decision where it's like they have all these beautiful and amazing shots and these cool battles, and then the director was like, you know what? I don't want to see any of it. Let's just darken it down and make sure that nobody knows what's going on. I will say, like, one of the coolest ideas where they have all these, like, Targaryen raiders, like, rushing through, and then all the lights kind of go out one by one. So cool, because you're just like, aw, this is gonna get real. And you get excited, and it was very exciting until the point where you couldn't see what was going on. Come on, let me see it. I've been waiting 7 years for this. Give me what I want. And then, of course, two other big issues I had. Targaryen lady who turns heel at the last moment. You're just gonna throw away all the years of this amazing Captain America-esque development where she comes in, she's like, I'm gonna help everyone, and everyone was like, yes, we want the queen. She turns heel and everyone's like, no, why would you write that in? And then finally, everything gets kind of, leveled out, we start wrapping things up, and everyone's wondering who the next king or the queen or who's gonna be the next one. Bran. It's Bran, the most unassuming, way out of left field. And everyone's like, okay, this seems legit. And I'm like, you're gonna give that kid the keys to the kingdom and no one's gonna say anything about it? They're just gonna, cover up all this, intrigue and power struggle? I can't. And then, what's west of Westeros? I get you, maybe you were gonna go for a spin-off on that, but come on. I hate all of it. I hate it.
Alright, so Bran becoming king at the end, while it does feature the very genuinely stupid thing of Tyrion being like, who has a better tale than Bran? I mean, Arya, the murder assassin with who has shapeshifting abilities and killed the king of the dead. But Bran being in charge at the end, I feel, does make sense in terms of what Tyrion said is not inaccurate. If we want to finally not repeat the mistakes of the past, maybe get the guy who pays attention to the history to take over. The lighting issue that people have with the Battle of Winterfell, I have always felt was very overblown. I understand what they're going for. It's another point in my subset of I think it could have been spaced out. The execution is not quite there. The idea of there being full chaos because you can't see anything, good idea for a zombie fight, and it turns the show from an epic, fantasy adventure to a horror movie sometimes. Daenerys was never Captain America, and that's the thing people keep forgetting. Daenerys had character flaws, namely, she liked to burn shit she didn't like. Screw everybody else's idea.
Look, we all had really high expectations. Yes, we did. But when you build this amazing world for 5 seasons and just really create something that no one's ever really seen before and really get into this rich character, and then the last 2 seasons, you just dropped the ball. People were invested in this story. There was time invested in this story. There was, this was a cultural phenomenon, and the writers didn't give it the respect it deserved. And you can even go online and find interviews with the writers saying, oh, we didn't know what we were really doing. This was pretty much film school for us. And I'm like, there were so many people who would have killed to be in this position and would have given the material the respect it deserved. They just decided not to do that, and now they're some of the most hated writers in Hollywood because of it. Bad last 2 seasons, terrible last season for sure.
I feel like that ending works as the ending of the story. They didn't have nearly as much of the material as they did in the past because they were going off book for the first time. They could have used that extra room that HBO would have gladly given them to flesh out and actually make those seasons land as hard as they could have. So I will concede that they didn't do as well and as good as they should have. But to call this garbage, to call this, are you comparing this to the last season of Lost? Or The Sopranos? Or Dexter? This is nowhere near the bottom of the pile of disappointing, terrible final seasons, and to say otherwise is to over-exaggerate the flaws of an otherwise good but rushed finale to a show that had been better.
So there you have it. You guys decide. Now it's in your hands. You guys can vote all over our social media platforms to see who won this debate. We'll see you next time on Rage Cage.